When you were a child, had you ever experienced a remarkable encounter with an extraordinary individual that left a lasting impression on your life? If so, who was this person? And what was it about that meeting that had such a profound impact on you? But let's take it a step further. Imagine that this very special person that we're referring to just happened to be someone who was renowned throughout the world for his appeal and special talent. A type of hero or legend of sorts. Or perhaps, maybe even an iconic movie star from the golden age of Hollywood. I'm Dr. Jen Palladino, a chiropractor who specializes in the treatment of musician and performing artist injury. Music and the creative arts can change the world, and I'm interested in exploring the passion that music and art evokes in people, whether it's playing or listening or creating or observing. It's that powerful driving force within the human soul that sparks emotion, unites the masses, bridges language and cultural barriers, and heals the body, mind, and spirit. Stay tuned and hear on today's show from my very special guest, who happens to be a member of one of Hollywood's most illustrious families, talk about his life-changing encounter with one of the most famous movie stars of the silver screen.
Welcome to Rockin' Healthy Lifestyles, a podcast featuring conversation with popular musicians and performing artists, sharing their stories of life's trials and triumphs, career ups and downs, and what stirs their creative juices. Also join us and learn how our guests keep fit and fabulous while rocking a healthy body, mind, and spirit. And now, introducing your host, Dr. Jennifer Palladino.
I'd like to welcome my very special guest who holds a unique place in the entertainment world by being the youngest son of legendary Broadway stage and Hollywood screen icons Shirley Jones and Jack Cassidy. Following the remarkable footsteps of his illustrious parents and three renowned brothers, David, Sean, and Patrick, he has carved his own path in the realm of acting and behind the scenes in Hollywood production and set decoration. He is also the author of the captivating book titled James Cagney Was My Babysitter, in which he offers a truly remarkable glimpse into a childhood experience involving the iconic actor James Cagney. And additionally, my guest serves as a valued member of the board of directors for the Los Angeles Police Department, contributing his passion to preserving the rich history and legacy of the LAPD. Thank you so much for joining me, Ryan Cassidy.
Thank you for having me. I'm actually the board of directors for the Los Angeles Police Museum.
Oh, the Police Museum.
Yeah.
Okay,
on the board of directors, yeah.
Well, I can't wait to talk with you about that.
Yeah.
I would also like to welcome my other guest, who is co-author of the book, James Cagney Was My Babysitter, and has also authored the critically acclaimed book, When We're Singin', The Partridge Family and Their Music. And thank you for being here, Johnny Ray Miller.
Well, thank you for having me.
And before we get started, you guys, and really get into these things, I just wanted to preface our conversation by saying that Rockin' Healthy Lifestyles, the listeners are of all ages and stages and are possibly not familiar with some of the people and pop culture references that we're about to talk about. So considering that, I may ask you guys to explain who that is and their significance, which may be like super obvious to us, but it's only to clarify for those who may not know. So with that being said, Ryan, would you be so kind as to start by giving us a little background about your lovely family?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I'm the youngest of four brothers, of four boys. My mother and father, my mother is Shirley Jones, who's an Academy Award-winning actress, and my father is Jack Cassidy, who is a Tony Award-winning actor. Both my parents have certainly left a legacy behind them. My mother is still alive. She's 89. My father passed away in 1976. My brother David, who's our half brother, he has a different mother. So my father was married to his mother for a short time, and David was a product of that. And David started at a very young age. First of all, he did not grow up with Sean and Patrick and I. He was born in Orange, New Jersey, grew up partly back east, and then came out to California. And established himself as an actor at a young age, and eventually landed on a television show called The Partridge Family. My father had already was well known in the stage as a theater actor, and had done also some movies, but primarily his background was theater. He also had an incredible singing voice, which a lot of people are not aware of, and really left his mark in the theater, and was enormously talented. I mean, probably one of the most talented human beings that I remember or know about, and even to this day. He saw talent in other people and helped them kind of realize it and nurture that with that person. He saw it in all kinds of people, and he was just a multi-talented man. He was a phenomenal decorator. He was a beautiful writer. So I guess what I'm saying is that my brothers and I come from two very talented people. My mother was already a movie star before I was born. My mother was established as a movie star in the 1950s. Her first movie was Oklahoma, which Carousel then followed, and these were musicals. And then she and The Music Man, and then she was a dramatic actress. She was in a movie called Elmer Gantry, which she won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Role. And my mother worked with every great movie star you can imagine, and really was an incredibly gifted actress. She also had an incredible singing voice, as anybody that knows her work knows that. So that's my mother and father. My mother was a movie star in the 50s and 60s, and then transitioned into working in television, and subsequently landed the role of Mrs. Partridge on The Partridge Family, working as Mrs. Partridge being the mother of my brother, Keith Partridge. And so they worked together on that show. My brothers, Patrick and Sean, are also both well-established. Patrick being a theater actor, director, a television actor, a producer, and my brother Sean is also a producer. Was a huge pop star in the 70s, and he is transitioned from working as a pop star, teen idol, if you will, to producing, writing for television, and he established that later on. They're multi-talented people, all of them, and I'm very fortunate in that. Growing up in that family, being the youngest of four boys, I saw a lot of things that were incredibly magical to me as a child, that were amazing, that rubbed off on me. My interest in music wasn't as strong as my brother's. Yes, I loved it, and people say, "Do you sing?" I have a voice, but I never really established myself as a singer, and I never honed in on working on myself as a singer. It wasn't something that interested me to the degree that it did certainly my brothers. I was an actor. I am an actor, although I don't work as an actor professionally anymore. but acting was something that appealed to me more than singing or playing musical instruments for that matter. So through the years, we went to school, graduated high school. I then went on to become an actor, and I worked on several different projects. I landed a role on a recurring role, if you will, on a show called The Facts of Life, which was a very popular show in the 1980s. My brother Sean was on a television show called The Hardy Boys, which was a well-established show and a very popular show, which was based on books that were written in the 1920s about two young boys that became detectives. And so, and then of course, David was on The Partridge Family. My brother Patrick has been on several different short-running series that ran for a little while, and did a slew of pilots. So we've all had our hand in working in television, and when I established myself as an actor, I was always drawn to other things, and I realized that it got to a point with me where I was not getting the jobs that I wanted to get as an actor, and I would get down to the wire on things, and then somebody else would get the job, and I realized that I had to create something else that I felt was unique to me, and something that was a passion of mine. So I did actually have a desire to become a law enforcement officer at a young age, and I almost did that, but I was concerned that I knew a lot of people in law enforcement. I did not want to. I wanted to do it. I always loved public service. Always loved being able to work with people, but I didn't want to work in a career where I was going to be bitter, and I didn't want to hate the job. And a lot of guys that I knew that worked in law enforcement, after so many years of doing it, really became kind of bitter. And I thought, no, that's not something that I want. I had a natural desire or natural knack for decorating. I loved decorating from the time I was a kid. I loved architecture. I loved history. And so while I was an actor going out on auditions, I would come home, and instead of really like honing in and learning my lines for the audition, I was rearranging my house. And so my older brother Sean at the time would come over, and every time he'd come over, he'd see my house look different than it did the day before or the week before he was there. And he said, "You ought to consider being a set decorator." Wow. Well, make a long story short, I was working at the Jim Henson company, Jim Henson Productions, and I was basically their office manager. And they were starting a new Muppet show, and this was at Raleigh Studios here in Hollywood. And I asked the producer if I could work on that show in the set decorating department, and he allowed me to have that opportunity. So I got a job on the show Muppets Tonight, and I worked on that show as my first job as a set dresser. And then from that show, I was hired on another show. I got into the union because I'm now in the union as a set dresser, which is kind of a set decorator, but you're more hands-on. It's more of a technical job where you're actually physically dressing the set. And I've had a whole career of jobs since then, and I'm still doing that after almost 30 years. That's not to say that I don't think about going back to being an actor again, but I've done some theater, and I've done some work as an actor since the days that I was doing it professionally, and I really believe that what I'm doing now and what I have been doing was my calling, and it's something that was a fit for me. And the lovely thing about it is that I I grew up in this business. I grew up around, sound stages, around actors, around directors, and so I'm able to work in the environment that I'd always been around since I was a child, and I'm very fortunate from that standpoint. And I'm still doing it. I work on the show NCIS.
Plus, you must have a natural inclination from all the family influence, and you're in the setting, which is perfect.
Yeah.
So it only made sense. That's wonderful, because there's a lot of people out there who they just don't they don't follow their dreams, and thank goodness that we're able to. That's a big thing. So, would you please tell us, who is David Cassidy? For those who don't know.
Yeah, so David Cassidy was probably he was a musician, he was an actor. He was a teen idol. But more than that, he was a consummate showman. He was just a man that he was one of the biggest pop stars of his generation, if not the biggest. I say pop stars. He was a musician and he was an actor, and he was a musician doing doing shows, doing concerts in conjunction with being an actor on a show called The Partridge Family, which was a show based on a family by the name of the Cowsills, which was a singing family. And, David became a huge phenomenon. I mean, probably he got the same kind of fan mail that the Beatles and Elvis Presley got.
Yeah.
And he carried his career through many decades. Between he started out in the pilot for the Partridge Family was made in the late '60s, and the show was a giant smash. It was a huge hit, and it lasted for several seasons. And then from that show, he ended up going on to do all kinds of other things, and went to Las Vegas and created his own show there. He took over for Michael Crawford in a show called Effects, and had a whole other career many years after the Partridge Family, and he had recorded just all kinds of amazing songs that became huge hits, made many albums, and was bigger than life. He was as big as they get.
And he brought incredible amount of joy to so many people still, because David still has a viable fan base. And he's
very much so.
He passed away, what is it, like 5-6 years ago?
He passed away in 2016, I think, 17, something like that.
17? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And still, that's pretty amazing to maintain that. So, the love is there. The love is there for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what was it like being David's kid brother?
It was wonderful. I mean, I loved my brother David, and I had a great relationship. I was proud of what the body of work that he had accomplished, and loved watching him perform. Again, I didn't grow up under the same roof with David, so when David would come to our house when I was a little boy, it was like this, my God, here he is, it's our brother David coming over to hang out with us. And it was great. I mean, he was an only child in that his mother and my father, he was the only product of that. There was no others. He had no other siblings from his mother. And of course, my dad then remarried my mother, and then Sean and Patrick and I were a product of that. And so he loved having brothers, and We had some laughs together through the years. We had some amazing experiences together. We did road trips together. We had just a really great time being brothers. And David, through the years, was always incredibly supportive of me. He believed in me. He saw the talents that I had, and he was always behind me, rooting for me. And, we had a really special bond together. So to answer your question, what it was like being his brother, I didn't see it beyond this is my brother. And yeah, he's a big pop star and everybody knows who he is. That really was, that wasn't on the forefront of what I considered to be important. What was important was he was still my brother, and I was proud of him, but it was just important that I kept that connection with him through it all, and I didn't lose it, and we never did, And my brothers Patrick and Sean had their own unique relationship with him that was very special, and when we were all together, it was pretty amazing, and we had some great times. We had some great times together. We really did.
Sure. How much older was David than you?
Well, I want to say 16 years.
Okay, so significant chunk of time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you just looked up to him because and you had other big brothers as well, but you surely looked up to him because of that. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I looked up to him. David and I actually had a lot in common, more than Patrick and Sean and I do. In that, we both shared the same interests for vintage automobiles. We both shared the same interests he loved architecture. He loved design. He loved fine things. And we also both shared a lot in common with our father, okay? Because I had a very unique relationship with my father, unlike maybe Patrick and Sean did. And David considered my father to be the most talented human being on the planet in his eyes, but then again, it's his dad.
Yeah.
And we both used to sit and talk about my dad's idiosyncrasies and his talents and the people that he impacted. And we really shared a lot of stories that were very personal, either to him or myself, and that created a bond. That was very important.
Yes, I have a sibling. I have a sister, and it's true. No one knows your parents and the dynamic like the siblings do, because you all kind of grew up together, and those were your parents, for goodness sakes. Johnny,
absolutely, yeah.
Do you have siblings?
I have one, yeah. And we were, very close to growing up. Of his sister. But flashing back onto Ryan, I got to tell you, when I met Ryan, he does have qualities that are very similar to David in that I just heard him say that, David would root for you. Well, Ryan would root for me. When I met him, he came back in to check out my book on the Partridge Family a couple times. And we're about the same age. And I remember asking him, so what did you watch when, you were a kid? And he goes, The Partridge Family and the Brady Bunch. Right? So, we had that in common, even though he was from the family. And then, the conversation just evolved. And the next thing I know, he said, I always wanted to write this story. It's called
James Cagney was my babysitter. Yeah.
And when he said the title, I could just see the whole thing, because at that point I had talked with him enough that I understood what his experience was. And so we just connected right away on this thing, and it has been a blast. We have had a lot of fun with this.
How did you guys meet?
I was doing an autograph show, sitting next to his mother selling my Partridge Family book. And Ryan is a very curious, normal human being who, he was there visiting his mom, walking around, checking out the scene. And he just came up and he was curious about the book. And we just started talking. And that's how it all happened. And we talked several times. And then he tells me about his idea for the book and says, "Do you want to do this with me?" And I was like, yeah.
Okay, so there's two different books. Johnny, your book is When We're Singing, the Partridge Family and Their Music. But then you guys got together and there it is. Then you guys got together and collaborated on James Cagney Was My Babysitter, which is, to me, one of the most impressive, and it really is up my alley as well, because I love nostalgia. I love old Hollywood. And this is such a beautiful introduction, I guess you could say, for many, many people, parents and children alike. Because I thought there's going to be some parents who read this book who don't know who James Cagney is. So if you would, please tell us, who is James Cagney?
I'll let you take that one, Ryan.
James Cagney was an Academy Award winning actor. James Cagney was established as a movie star 80 years ago in the 1930s, right? And he was known as a gangster. He became a gangster actor, but really his love and his passion was song and dance. He was under contract with Warner Brothers. He was born in New York, and came out to Hollywood, and was put under contract with Warner Brothers in about 1930, and became a giant movie star in the decade of the 1930s. Primarily known for being a gangster actor, though, and what took some risks as an actor that not a lot of actors took in those days. In that he was an actor that played a bad guy, but yet you loved him. He had a certain charm and appeal about him that you rooted for him no matter what. And ended up transitioning into in the early 40s was cast in a movie called Yankee Doodle Dandy, where he played the life of George M. Cohan, and ended up winning an Academy Award for that performance. He was an incredible dancer, tap dancer, and then later went on to establish more incredible movies with he had his own production company with his brother after he left Warner Brothers, and continued working. He worked up until, I want to say, the 1960s, and was in the top 5 biggest movie stars of the 1930s. He was in probably the top 3. It was, Clark Gable, Errol Flynn, Bogart, James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney. I could go on, but James Cagney was in the top 5. And he ended up doing a movie with my mother in 1957 called Never Steal Anything Small. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. And that's, in essence, that was the bridge. That was the bridge on how, excuse me, on how I met him. My mom knew him, my father knew him, and my mother kept in touch with him. He got married. James Cagney got married in 1936 to a lady, and they ended up buying a home in Beverly Hills. But they always kept a home back east. They had a farm back east, and he raised horses. And what's special in the book, and also special in just who he was and his character, was that he really was the antithesis of a lot of these characters that he played in motion pictures. He he was not a very tall man. He was a boxer. I say a boxer. He was an amateur boxer, but he learned how to box at a young age, and he had to defend himself, being a kind of a smaller fella, and had a tough guy persona, but really underneath it, he was an incredibly sweet, loving, endearing human being that loved animals. He loved art. He loved painting. And he established himself as a painter later on in life, and that was his hobby. And the story in James Cagney Was My Babysitter is really a connection between a little boy and an elderly man who happens to be James Cagney. And the love that comes out of that one afternoon with him is conveyed very well in the story, and it explains that even though you can be a big movie star and have done all this incredible work and you're well known, your connection with a young boy that you don't really know, except that you know his parents, can be very unique and special, and stay with that boy forever. And that's what it did. It stayed with me forever. And I wanted to share it.
So just for those people who aren't familiar, we're talking huge movies, recognizable movies like Angels with Dirty Faces, White Heat, Mr. Roberts. These are The Public Enemy. These were huge movies that James Cagney was known for. But this is a story about you as a little boy. And can you explain how you ended up spending that afternoon with Mr. Cagney that encouraged you to, and was so impressionable on you that it encouraged you to write this book?
Well, my mother and father were going through a separation at the time, and my father came to pick me up at the house that I was raised in. He wasn't living there at the time. And we were planning to spend the day together. I think we were going to go see a movie. And something came up where he had to go to the Cagneys anyways for something, and was going to have to ultimately bring me back home. And I think he decided that when we got to the Cagneys that, or that he would have to either take me back home or take me with him. And when Jim found out about this, Jim said, "Jack, why don't you leave Ryan with my wife and I? We'll take care of him, and come back and get him when you're done with your personal business." And so I ended up spending several hours there. And I was a very shy boy, and I didn't really like being in homes with people I didn't know very well.
It's understandable.
I knew who James Cagney was. I knew that he was this well-known entertainer. And I loved the history of cinema even as a kid. So there was a curiosity that sparked my, interests about him and being there. And so I think the timing was good. And when my dad said, "I'll pick you up later, are you okay staying here?" And I said, "Yeah, Dad." From that point on, it was just pretty, the story, well, the book explains it, but I had a really wonderful time. And the moments of that afternoon and the feelings that I got never left me. And I knew in my heart that I had to share this story at some point where I could convey the kindness that came out of him, and how it stayed with me, and how that can carry over to really any relationship that you have with somebody or that you meet. And so John helped me create that, and he did it beautifully. And part of the story is a drawing that's, of course, in on the back of the book. That's also part of the whole story. Is this drawing of this leprechaun, or this gnome, if you will. There it is, and that is framed in my house, it's in my living room here. And I would stare at that drawing, and it was almost like a connection that I had with Jim, even though he wasn't here, that was right here with me. And I thought, that was an afternoon that was meaningful to me. And I was going through a time in my life between my parents separating, where I was kind of confused, and I guess having somebody like Jim sit there with me and make it about my interests and me was really important for me at that time. And I think that was something that stayed with me and always warmed my heart. It made me really, really happy that he cared enough to see where I was at, how I was doing, and wanted to, as I've shared many times before, he didn't talk about himself. He talked about what my interests were and how it connected with him. And we had something in common that was really, really special, and both completely different people, different ages. So that's part of the charm of the story.
So he was very almost like grandfatherly to you.
Absolutely.
And he validated your feelings by I guess you could say, established adult, older gentleman coming down to a child's level and really taking the time and showing that he has true interest in you.
That's exactly right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
he wanted to know what my interests were, and he had a creative mind already. He was a great storyteller. What I saw in him, though, that was unique for me, is that we had things that were similar, that we both liked. We were both from Irish heritage. He loved the unknown. He loved creating an environment that was fairy tale like, if you will. That was, he was an actor, but he did it in a way where you wanted to know more. I didn't want to leave that day, from getting there and going, I don't want to mess anything up, to going, I want to stay here. It was pretty great.
That is pretty great. Now,
yeah.
Did you know your grandfather, Shirley's dad, Jack's dad? Did you know your grandfathers?
No, I did not meet them. I met my grandmother, but my grandparents were. My father was born in 1927. His mother was an older lady then, so my grandmother was very, very old when I was, I don't remember meeting my father's mother. I remember meeting my grandmother on my mother's side.
So when this wonderful gentleman, grandfatherly gentleman, just shared those few hours with you, it must have touched you in a way, because a lot of kids grow up with their grandfathers, so,
sure.
They have a lot of that. But that was something that you really weren't familiar with. And then this wonderful man came and focused on you as a 7-year-old. Well, that means everything, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And, when you're that age, you're a sponge. You're absorbing everything. And those emotions, observations that you're absorbing at that age are imprinted forever. And they only manifest as you get older, in that those memories they become more defined, and you understand why they were so impressionable on you much more when you're older than when you're when you're younger. And I knew that the importance of that day had to be put down on paper in some way.
So Johnny, how did you help Ryan take that story and, I guess, make it like a physically tangible one in the book?
Well, what's interesting, and I'm listening to Ryan talk, is my experience as a fan of David Cassidy parallels in some way his experience with James Cagney, in that I was a little kid and I was, entertained by the magic of the television set. And, for so many of us, David left a mark in music. For me, it was very much about music that, comforts me to this day. So just as Ryan has those moments in childhood that have to do with his experience with James Cagney, discovering basically, magic and life when you're young. For me, it was through the television set. And so when he would talk to me about the experience he had, the innocence and the clarity in which he could tell that story, I could relate to that from that standpoint of, what affected you when you were young so much in a positive way. Yeah. So, it's a similar experience. They're different, but the emotional experience is the same. So when he would tell me the story, I could relate to the experience, even though mine was different. I could relate to the emotions. And so when we talked about his story, one of the things we did was, we talked about it a lot, so that then I could kind of guide him and say, you know what, you use this phrase a lot. I would use this if I were you. You tell it this way a lot. I would continue to tell it that way, because I could recognize his speech patterns and all of that. Mm-hmm. So I would kind of just, steer him so that we could capture together his pure voice, the story that is pure of his, and the feelings, the way he described them. So that's kind of how we did it. There was that relatability thing, and then, there was just him telling the story and me kind of saying, that's great, you need to use it that way,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, just from me reading the book, I mean, I really felt like, first of all, you feel like you're there. It was like you're also that 7-year-old, like, shadowing you, Ryan.
Yeah.
And I'm not so surprised about Mr. Cagney and what kind of person he was, because I don't know, you just made me feel connected. You made me feel connected to him, and that's somebody I've never met.
Yeah.
But
I think that's because of his pure experience that he had. I mean, I think that experience could have been with, Humphrey Bogart or Elizabeth Taylor. It doesn't really matter who, but he had this experience that's relatable to all human beings, no matter what. It's an innocent child's experience with lessons that come out of it, and ideas and things that you can dream about. That's all in that book. All of that we all share in common from our childhoods. It's all in that book.
One of the parallels to this book when it comes to other kids and who they see as mentors or people that they have experiences with is when we first set out to make this book, I knew that James Cagney, that kids aren't going to know who James Cagney is. But James Cagney can be anybody in this book, and in that he can be a sports figure. He can be whatever child young person has in their mind as being the person that they love, that they idolize, if you will. James Cagney can be that person. It's not about that it's James Cagney. It's an experience that I had with a man that was memorable, and that had a positive impact. And I believe that when you are a public figure, and especially in the arts, you're perceived as being that person based on how you view it or what you see them being, and really they're sometimes not that. They're the opposite.
Yeah.
And that's why this book was meaningful, because it showed a side to a man who, again, was known for being this tough guy persona actor, also being an incredibly talented song and dance man. But really, at the core of who he is, he was just a simple, wonderful, sweet, humble, wise man. And everything that he said was meaningful. But it may not have been a lot, but it was meaningful. Meaning that it wasn't like he talked and talked and talked, but what came out of his mouth was incredibly meaningful and stayed with me.
I think it's that story of the elderly person with wisdom to share, and the young person ready to absorb it. It's really that. It's a real universal story. But along the way, with this book, you do get to learn a little bit about James Cagney, because there's some interesting biographical stuff in there and some pictures that are really cool. And the connection to James Cagney and his mother, Shirley, is in there. But the story itself is a heartwarming experience that is universal.
And I loved that. That was super smart that you guys did that you included, Shirley and how she spoke of her experience with Mr. Cagney and some background about him. So it's right there, because, maybe the little 7-year-old that it's being read to might not know, but that parent or grandparent, it's so relatable across the board. Even to older people who knew James Cagney and who was a fan, that makes it extra special, which is nice. But those informative, even about the Partridge Family as well, like they were very informative pieces that were included to complete the story. So we know where it's coming from.
You can pick up the book and not know anybody, not know any of the players in the book.
Yeah,
and at the end of the book, you'll know.
Yeah.
And it will have meaning to you. It'll be meaningful in some way, I hope. At least that's the idea.
Yes. And what I'd like to do also too is give a shout out to the illustrator, Andrea Carvajal.
Carzabel. Andrea Carzabel, yeah.
She really, those characters that she illustrated, really, first of all, your parents, they look just like your parents. That's so cute.
Yeah.
That she was really great. And how she drew Mr. Cagney was just how you saw him that day. An older man.
She nailed it.
She totally nailed it.
She really did.
Yeah. What happened? What is that part of the process? Does the publisher offer you different options when looking for an illustrator, and you just chose Andrea's?
Well, actually, the publisher found her. They sort of took the lead on all of that, and we couldn't be more grateful. She just was absolutely perfect. She absolutely got it. You could see it in every drawing when we would see the proofs. It'd be like, oh my God, she gets this.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
she really nailed it. She got it because I think after reading the story and it all came together, and it really came across in her illustrations. I would wake up and see new illustrations every morning when we were making the book.
Yeah.
And I'm like, she's got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so much of the book, because little ones who maybe aren't ready to read, that it's all about the visuals, and you wanted to make sure that the story got put forth. And so, yeah, you picked a winner. You picked a winner.
Yeah. We're really proud.
So it sounds like you were quite a comfortable, collaborative couple in this project. Are there more projects that you're looking at doing together in the future?
We've talked about it, and I believe that it will happen. We're still kind of absorbing this one, but I believe that it will happen. I have some ideas, and I've bounced them off Johnny. I've bounced them off Johnny, and they're ideas that are not unlike the book James Cagney Was My Babysitter, from the looking through the lens of a little from the standpoint of a little boy, and my experience growing up in show business, and how I can bring this generation into the incredible experiences that I had as a kid, and teach them to the generation that doesn't know the Partridge Family and doesn't know, some of the body work that my family has done. And I believe that if it can be told in a story that's simple, not unlike James Cagney With My Babysitter, I think we've got a couple of things that we can explore, and we've already talked about it.
That's great, and I'm excited to see what's going to come from there. So now, Johnny, are you working on a book with Henry Diltz, rock photographer Henry Diltz?
Boy, word gets around, doesn't it?
You told me.
I know. Yeah, I know.
You did.
Yeah, so we're working on a book of all of his pictures of David. He has endless pictures of David. Endless. And so, yeah, we're working on a picture book together.
This is Henry Diltz, the rock photographer.
Yeah. Yeah, he was very good friends with David. They were very close.
Didn't Henry go on like 2 world tours with David when David was in the 70s when he was doing his tour, right?
Yeah.
So
he did.
Sure. Oh, he must have a killer picture. I can't wait to see it.
He does. There's over 13,000, and that's just the color, just to sort through. Of course, we can't get that many in a book. And then that doesn't even count the black and white. So there's plenty.
I guess, an encyclopedia of David Cassidy coffee table books with all the pictures, right? Yes.
Volume 7, right?
Right. Well, the book is called James Cagney Was My Babysitter. Hang on, everybody.
Oh, you got one too.
Cute.
All right.
Yeah, you guys sent this to me, and it's autographed. I am so proud, and rubbing it in everybody's face. Okay.
I hope everybody orders it. It's a great book.
Yes. And it was released in March of 2023, and it's available on Amazon. And to learn more about Ryan Cassidy and Johnny Ray Miller, please visit whenwe'resingin.com or your Facebook pages, Ryan Cassidy and Johnny Ray Miller on Facebook. And you can also find these links on the Rock and Healthy Lifestyle website at www.rockandhealthylifestyles.com. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Ryan Cassidy and Mr. Johnny Ray Miller, for taking the time and sharing this wonderful, beautiful book. James Cagney Was My Babysitter, and we can all use a beautifully tender story, and we greatly appreciate the nostalgia that came along with it. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. You're welcome. My pleasure. And now, some food for thought. Meeting inspiring people in a positive way can greatly impact a child's perspective by boosting their confidence and fostering their personal growth. These interactions can ignite a child's dreams and empower them to make a positive difference in society as they grow up. Encounters with exceptional individuals can certainly occur at any stage of life and are not limited to childhood alone. But for a young Ryan Cassidy, the profound impact of connecting with Mr. James Cagney is evident in his strong desire to share the experience and has been affectionately captured in the essence of his book. It was this lovely encounter that fueled Ryan's passion and served as a driving force behind his storytelling. And having an iconic Hollywood actor play the role of that exceptionally special person certainly didn't hurt. I'm Dr. Jen Palladino. Thanks for joining me. This is Dr. Jen Palladino. Thank you for tuning in to Rockin' Healthy Lifestyles. Please visit our website at www.rockinhealthylifestyles.com. That's rock, the letter N, healthylifestyles.com to find show notes, guest links, and how you can join us to become part of our community in which we explore the effects of music and arts on health and well-being. Music by Matt Thompson. This is a Rockin' Healthy Lifestyles production.